Hey, let's talk about Autistic History, the Autism Wars. This is part 13. All right, let's learn more about this parent-founded autism epidemic. We are in the 90s right now, and there's an explosion of autism organizations being founded and launched by parents of autistics, and all of them have an idea about the cause and the cure for autism, and all of them have an agenda based on that belief for them. So here we go. Let's just jump in. So how did parent-run organizations convince the world that there was a looming autism epidemic? All right, so the idea of an epidemic likely sources to before the 80s, but it didn't gain traction really until the mid-90s. And this was thanks to some very privileged parents of autistics, celebrity influencers, and a whole lot of artistic license and movie magic. Yep, lots of movie magic, absolutely. So in the 90s, in the late 90s, autism was promoted as a monster that could snatch anyone's child. Parents proclaimed that autism could attack without warning, even while their babies slept in their cribs. These parents communicated that they watched in horror as their typically developing child regressed in language, expression, lost learned skills, and eventually became trapped in their minds, unable to connect with the rest of humankind. Some describe their autistic children as soulless and incapable of love. These parents passionately believed or passionately declared autism kidnapped their child, and if it could happen to them, it could happen to anyone. Autism didn't discriminate. Autism prevalence was on the rise, and something terrible had to be causing this dramatic increase in the autistic population. Perhaps it was something environmental, but whatever the cause, these parents insisted autism was swiftly becoming a public health crisis. And during this era, the internet was becoming more available, and parent-run organizations created online communities to exchange information, network, and to support one another. Previously, in-person conferences, mailed newsletters, and telephone calls were the common communication avenues used. A pen pal group maintained by one of these organizations was how Jim Sinclair, autistic self-advocate, was first able to connect with other autistics. Yes, autistic voice, autistic activism and advocacy, even back then. Yep. All right, they state, when I had first started seeking to communicate with other autistic people in the late 1980s, I had approached autism organizations and professionals who worked with autistic people, and in the naive belief that they and I and other verbal autistic people had some common purpose, said Sinclair. My purposes in seeking to form a mutual aid self-help group for autistic people were to share first-hand experiences to counter the uniformly gloomy and pessimistic and often insulting and offensive portrayals of autism in the existing literature, and to advocate for improved support services for autistic people. Sinclair also shared they had lost their job and were homeless at that time, but unable to qualify for any assistance because they were considered too bright to be disabled. All right, this next section has got a subhead, Autistics Seeking Autistics. In 1991, Sinclair attended the Autism Society of America, ASA, conference. The environment of the event was a sensory nightmare of flickering lights, constant motion and noise. Worse, the speakers and literature focused on autistics being a defective type of human and that our very existence is a source of never-ending grief for our families. Regardless of the cacophonous and gloomy environment, Sinclair made a point to attend. Quote, "Some of us came to autism conferences anyway because we had no other way to meet others like ourselves. But even if we did happen to find other autistic people there, the environment was very hostile from both a sensory and an emotional standpoint. At best, meeting at conferences gave us a chance to find out about the existence of someone we might want to get to know better and to exchange contact information so we could follow up later, usually by means of writing letters. Not many of us were on the internet at the time." During the 1991 conference, several autistic advocates made a point of asking questions and making comments during the Q&A portion of the presentations. They identified themselves as being autistic each time. The presenters seemed to welcome the contributions, and many parents from the audience stayed after to ask questions. The visible presence of autistics at the conference attracted the attention of the ASA Board of Directors. Autistics were approached at the conference by a board member and a few NT parents. That's short for neurotypical, if you are new to those acronyms. So, autistics were approached at the conference by a board member and a few NT parents and asked if they'd like to help establish an ASA Autistic Advisory Committee. Have an autistic representative at each board meeting, participate in the planning of future conferences, and have space in their community newsletter. The autistic self-advocates were surprised by the offer, but accepted it immediately. They shared their goal of launching a self-advocacy organization with these folks, and ASA responded they could provide some financial and administrative support too. This offer, Sinclair would later learn, was pure gaslight. There was some lip service given to it at a following July board meeting, with an authorization given to a board member to take charge of organizing an autistic advisory committee. Sinclair attempted to follow up by phone, but nothing ever came of it. Later, an ASA board member would confirm Sinclair's suspicion that the public display of support was an empty gesture meant to impress parents of autistics. The ASA board catered to parents because parents have the most voting power in their organization. They never expected to actually implement any changes, and as far as they were concerned, autistics didn't have the ability to organize without them. So I'm going to wrap up part 13 here, and when we start part 14, we will start at the power of autistic connection, and this takes place and starts in 1992. So thank you so much for learning a little bit of autistic history with me, and the more we know about how we got here, the better we can advocate going forward. So thanks.